Tables and seats are now on sale for the biggest night in the digital video calendar, the TellyCast Digital Video Awards. We're celebrating excellence in the only award ceremony created especially for the social video industry, with over 100 channels, shows and series shortlisted across 27 categories. It all takes place on the evening of 5th of June during South by Southwest London Week at the luxurious Londoner Hotel in Leicester Square. The guest list reads like the who's who in the next generation of entertainment. So book your table, half table or seat now and join the talent and executives shaping the content industry of tomorrow. Just visit digitalvideoawards.co.uk to secure your place now. The TellyCast Digital Video Awards, the biggest night in the digital video calendar. We'll see you there.
TellyCast.
Hi, I'm Justin Crosby and welcome to another TellyCast. We have a bit of a scoop for you this week as we welcome, direct from Middle-earth, Billy Boyd and Dom Monaghan, famed for playing Merry and Pippin in the epic Lord of the Rings trilogy. Billy and Dom have been all around the world filming their new 6-part travel TV show, Billy and Dom Eat the World, which is produced by Dash Pictures and distributed by Abacus Media Rights, who soon, of course, to be Sphere Abacus Media Rights. Welcome to the show, guys. How are you doing?
Very good. Really well.
Thank you for popping in to TellyCast.
Of course.
On your travels around the world. When was we'll talk about the show in a second, but when was the last episode finished? I mean, you've been filming this over the last year, haven't you, all around the world?
Yeah, so the last episode was Switzerland, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was just before Dom and I did the play together, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It was.
so it must have been end of the year,
Yeah, November.
right before Christmas.
Right, okay.
23.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So,
Good time to go to Switzerland because obviously we did a lot of kind of alpine stuff.
Yeah.
It's freezing.
yeah, it looked it.
It's
Yeah.
Amazing.
beautiful though.
Everything
So
else that we'd done was kind of warm, and some places were very warm, like
Yeah.
Texas. So to do the last one in Switzerland was brilliant.
Well, let's talk about the show then. Give us a bit of information. I mean, I've got the list of the locations, but first of all, tell us how you got involved in the show. What was the genesis? Was it originally your idea, or and how did that all come together?
So Dom and I had a podcast together a few years ago called The Friendship Onion. And part of The Friendship Onion, we didn't always have guests on, but whether there was a guest there or not, we always had Billy and Dom Eat the World, where it was easier when there was a guest because they would bring something from their childhood or from where they were from or just a memory so if it was someone from Texas, they might bring something from Austin that, his grandmother had introduced them to. And then we would try it and we would mark it out of 10. And it was always everyone's sort of favorite part of the podcast. And we really enjoyed it because it kind of introduced, sometimes if a guest was a bit nervous or not talking much, or you bring out the food and it just takes them right back. And then they're like, oh, I remember my grandmother used to do this. Or I remember all my friends would go down to the shops and we'd buy this, So it was a sort of easy way in. So from that, we kind of thought it would be a good TV show and a good way of seeing a community and seeing people and how people live through the food that they eat,
Yeah.
So that's how it sort
Well, it's
of
a
came.
communal thing, right? And it brings, as you say, it brings people together, and it's a very, you can't get much more social than sitting down and eating together.
Yeah, true. And I mean, Billy and I have known each other for, over 25 years now. And when we were younger, when we first met, the way that we would kind of get together and socialize and explore places was probably more like bars, right? But as you get older, you get to a point where, you might have a glass of wine with dinner, but you'd rather have a meal as opposed to being out and tying one on a little bit. So it's just really kind of evolved in the way that Billy and I spend time with each other. Billy and I are also interested in what people are passionate about, what people feel positive about, the things that they hold on to. And all that stuff really speaks to food,
Yeah. Well, there's 6 episodes, and you're in London, Scotland, and in particular the Outer Hebrides, which looks fantastic. You're in California, Texas, Japan, and Switzerland. So literally all around the world. Why did you choose those particular countries to go to? Because obviously there's lots more, right? You could go to India, or you could do, I mean, maybe that's for season 2.
Yeah, let's hope so.
Yeah. But yeah, why those particular 6 territories then?
Well, I think London obviously works really well with Dash because the production office is based in London. They've obviously made quite a few episodes in and around London, so they know all the people. And it was just for the first episode, getting to know a crew, doing it in a place where we all speak the same language, same currency, all that kind of stuff, made sense. Obviously, Billy comes from Scotland, so that's, something that just, again, has a nice correlation with the people doing it. But as you say, I mean, we flew out of Glasgow to the Hebrides, right? But we purposefully spent no time in the kind of Scottish mainland. We wanted to get to the islands. And I've spent some time with Billy in Glasgow and a little bit of time in Edinburgh, apart from that, Oban for like 4 or 5 days. But the Outer Hebrides, I mean, we got there and had the best weather of the year. The guys said that, for 4 or 5 months of the year, it's brutal up there. And it was roasting hot, super friendly.
Did you get the midges? Did you?
No, we didn't.
No midges, no. Beautiful. And I think we gave a list of places that we would like to go, and we kind of wanted to tell different stories as well. So as Dom says, when Scotland came up, which was a great idea, loved it, but we thought, well, let's go somewhere where we haven't seen as much, as the big cities. So the idea of the Outer Hebrides came up, which I'd never been to, and it's beautiful. You wouldn't believe it. There's it looks like tropical beaches, right? White sand.
Incredible.
Going into turquoise waters. It's absolutely beautiful. And the people, the things that we kind of found out about up there, honesty boxes. So when we went to make breakfast to get eggs, we didn't go to a store. We went to an honesty box where there's eggs in there from a farm and you just leave the money in there. It was all these kind of off the beaten tracks was such a beautiful thing to see.
Yeah,
I think one of the top 5 beaches in the world is in the Outer Hebrides.
Wow.
Which we drove past. We were above it. It was stunning.
And it's not somewhere that you think about food, though. I mean, you don't think about, this is a foodie hotspot. So tell us about what sort of food, without too many spoilers, what sort of food did you discover in the Outer Hebrides?
Because I think we see the show even more the food is kind of the star, really, but we see it as a way of getting into communities and people and telling stories. And, if it's a guy who's passionate about making cheese in Switzerland, then you get to know him and his family and the history of that through cheese. But it's not just about the cheese, it's more about the guy who's making the cheese. And that was the same thing in the Outer Hebrides. There was families, butchers making black pudding that's known throughout the world, Outer Hebrides black pudding. And there was, I think, 3 butchers who were making it up there. It was MacLeod and Sons, MacLeod and MacLeod and MacLeod butchers. And we went to, I think it was MacLeod and Son. And then we had a pizza that had black pudding on it, but that was from MacLeod and MacLeod, and we felt bad that it was from a different, So you find out about these families that have been doing this for generations and generations, And another great thing up there was we got to judge a baking contest. So all the great bakers all come to do this competition. So we had 50 different shortbreads to try. And
this is like the Outer Hebrides Village Fete.
Exactly. It just happened to be the weekend that we were there and they asked us to judge it. And then there was a clooted dumpling in the competition, which I'd forgotten about.
What is that? What?
It's a sort of, as Dom says, it's sort of like a sort of fruit cake, but it's Scottish and my granny made it. Yeah. And I used to love it when she says, "Oh, I've made a clooted dumpling." I was like, "Oh, great." And I haven't thought about it in 30 years. And as soon as I tasted it, I was like, "Oh, that's my granny," straight back there. So those sort of emotional memories that food can bring is super important.
Yeah. We judged the best tractor, didn't we?
So we did.
Best tractor.
I wouldn't say we know much about tractors.
No, it was more kind of appearance than anything else. And then we went farming for kelp. They had a little kelp farm off the coast, and they used kelp to make this gin at this distillery. So Billy and I were like, yeah, great. We like gin and tonic, and that's cool. But I assumed that most of the distilleries up there would be for whiskey. But the guy said to us, you can't have a whiskey distillery until, was it 15 years or 10 years?
7 years.
7 years.
The whiskey has to sit in a barrel before it can be called whiskey.
But they created the distillery. So they're like, well, in this 7 years, we'll make gin instead.
Until the whiskey,
for the
we
whiskey
could call
to
the whiskey
mature.
whiskey, right?
But then the whiskey ended up being this like super popular, sought after gin. And we watched them make that. I got a little bit drunk.
You got a little bit, yeah.
Just
Because we were doing the spirit of the whiskey as well after a couple of gin and tonics. So, I mean, really interesting stories,
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah.
Getting to know, I mean, who's opening a distillery that you know that you're not making any money or doing anything for 7 years? Yeah. So these guys made the whiskies, put it in the barrels, and then went, oh, what do we do now?
Brilliant.
Amazing.
Yeah, I love that.
So, really wide range of culinary experiences that you've had on your travels. What was your favourite meal, do you think? Your one favourite dish that you had tried or...
We've been struggling with this answer for a long time since we made the show, because honestly, we were so spoiled. There's a couple of little junky things that we tried that you probably wouldn't try again, but even those weren't unpleasant. And I would say 90, maybe even 95% of the food you'd think, I can't believe we got that for free. That was fantastic. Like, as Billy was touching upon, a lot of this is about the way it makes you feel and the night and all that kind of stuff. So the one that sticks in my head the most is when we were in Japan on our last night, we were able to set up this yatai, which is basically like a huge kind of food stall, restaurant, kitchen on a trolley. So the guy showed up and the trolley was like a little bit bigger than this table. And we said to him, how long will it take to set up? And he said, about an hour. And I thought, there's no way it's going to take an hour. It'll take 15 minutes. But then we realized he's got like gas connected to it, electricity, running water. He's got a bar, a full bar.
Draft beers.
And
this thing.
Like frying pans and boiling pots and all this kind of stuff. Served everything. We did the segment with the gang, but because it was our last night, we then stayed for a couple of hours afterwards. People are coming in, locals are coming in, drinking beer. Every so often he's coming over to us. Here, have this snack, have this, little gyoza. Billy said it was the greatest gyoza he's had in his life. Yeah. Little yakitori chicken. I mean, it's just chicken on a stick, little bit of, spring onions, sesame, some soy. So simple, but just the people put so much love in it. So I think ultimately that's the one that I would go to the first.
Yeah.
There's so many.
Yeah, there were so many, but you just took me right back there. And that's exactly what we want from the show. This guy and his wife set that up every night. Takes them an hour, set it up. People come out of offices and that might be their favourite. Is it yatai?
Yatai.
Yatai, or there's other ones along the street that are all getting built every night. And then at 1 a.m. or 2 a.m., put it all back down again. Takes an hour.
Wow. They
go off in their trolley. And then the next night they're out again. And the woman's father had it before them. So that yatai has been coming out there for, years.
Yeah, because the husband kind of, he wasn't necessarily the leader, but he slightly kind of ran the show a little bit. So I think Billy and I both assumed, he's the boss man. The wife's helping out. And Billy asked him, like, how did you come about the business? And he was like, no, it's her business. It was her father's. And he also said that yatai gave permission for all the other yatais in that area. Do you remember him saying
that? Right.
So if you wanted to set up a yatai, you had to come work for him, volunteer for him for a little bit, and show that you mean business. And then they would allow you to have a yatai. And the other thing that he said, which I think is now changing for the better, is the Japanese government tried to close it down during the Tokyo Olympics. They said, we don't want any of this street food thing. It doesn't look great. So they kind of calmed it down a little bit, and now it's building again. And Billy and I were like, why are you taking away like the great thing, the idiosyncrasies that kind of define these places, So we were really happy that we got that on camera, because hopefully it will build and build,
Well, as you say, it's a cultural language that you're learning as well as just food as well, right? Which is, the joy of it.
Exactly, the joy of finding that place. And maybe, as we said, eating the best gyoza you've ever had. And you've found it, and it's this family who's made it.
Yeah.
You know, rather than going to some, you know, chain restaurant that you could go anywhere and, you know, it's been shipped in.
Yeah.
He was making that in front of our eyes. The lady had made this amazing soup full of dumplings and, you know, and she was making that all day before they got there. It's just, I mean, you can't buy that. It's beautiful.
Want to get ahead in digital-first content? The Drop is the go-to newsletter for industry professionals, delivering insider news, trends, and insights straight to your inbox. Navigate the fast-changing landscape of digital-first production, distribution, and monetization. Sign up now for free at dropmedia.co.uk and stay informed with The Drop.
He's also showing us how to make the gyozas, which, you know, he's got this paste, you know, a little bit of pork and some spices and stuff. And you just go, yeah, super simple. You take the little thing, a little bit of paste, do that, put it down. And we're like, okay. And I watched Billy do it first. And, you know, Billy's kind of going, what? And I'm going, is it really that hard? He's like, oh, you wouldn't believe how hard it is. And I was like, give me a go. And it just falls apart in your hand.
There's something about the angles of the fold. I just couldn't,
My
brain couldn't put it in for some reason.
Yeah.
And he was making, you know, 80 a minute. He was just,
Brilliant.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
So is this the first travel series that you've done?
Together, yeah.
And is it the first TV project that you've done together, or have you done other things together since?
I mean, we've guested on stuff, haven't we? But in terms of like Billy and I together, yeah.
Yeah, this would be the first, yeah.
Right. And you're executive producers on the show, so this is something you're really invested in, right? This is something that you've come up with and developed from the podcast idea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what's it like? Because obviously you've been friends right from back to Lord of the Rings days. What's it like working together then?
It's great.
As mates, right? Because it can change the sort of dynamic of friendship if you're working together.
But I think we both very quickly realized when we did the podcast that the Billy and Dom Eat the World thing kind of writes itself. You know, you pick the food item when we're doing the podcast, and that's it. And then for Billy and I doing the show alongside the people over at Dash, we pick the location. And there might be a couple of moments where Billy and I may have said in the first season, could we do this instead? Or maybe switch the order, or like, that doesn't really quite feel like the show. But for the most part, I think we just said, that's exactly what we want to do, you know? So I like the idea that we can try and get across on the show of we are landing and having the experiences in real time and it's being recorded, as opposed to being overly produced or scripted in some way. Yeah. So to a certain extent, I mean, obviously we want to know where we're going, what we're doing, but I don't really like a huge deep dive into the things that we're doing because I want to find it out on camera.
Yeah.
And sometimes us not being very knowledgeable is, you know, it's more like the normal person, you know, we're
genuinely learning for the first time. Right?
Yeah. And the people at Dash have been great, kind of really taking on what we want from the show and finding the best people for that we want people who are kind of really passionate about what they're doing, and, you know, the positivity that comes through that, meeting people who are passionate about whatever it is, you know, you know, whether it's a barbecue in Texas or, you know, making a clouty dumpling in Scotland. If you're passionate about it, then, you know, you could be on TV speaking to them for an hour and it would be interesting because they're telling you about their passion, about their community, where that food came from, you know.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, this is one of the things that I've been passionate about for a while. It's like, it's a really interesting time in the arts, I think, because like there's this, I use the word culture kind of broadly here, but there's this kind of culture now that's gone kind of seeped through the arts, seemed to start in the music industry and it's kind of moved around a little bit, of we want everything now and we want it free. And it's because it's created this kind of jaded kind of feeling in the arts of nothing's special and nothing's great because you get it for free and it doesn't really mean anything. And I think that's why Billy and I were really keen on leaning into people's passions, because anytime you hear someone speak about something passionate, there's that great energy, you know. And I think we are losing that a little bit in all forms of art, but in documentary TV, when people are watching it, you're just like, oh yeah, there's another person, another rich person traveling around the world doing stuff. And we want it to be a little bit more kind of spit and sawdust and talking to people who might have spent their entire life savings to create this little restaurant, and it's doing well and they believe in it. You know, those are the stories that we want to tell.
Yeah. And it's what's I really enjoyed about this series is that it's not so long ago we were in lockdown, right? It's not so long ago that everyone was saying, you know, when are we ever going to be able to create a travel series again, you know? And it's not that long ago. And to see a show which is really premium and looks fantastic, and, you know, you guys are genuinely engaging with people from all around the world, it's, you know, it's a really nice, fresh take on it, I think.
Oh, I'm glad, because that was the other. We wanted it to be authentic. That it's not. I think I totally agree with what Dom's saying, that things are so easy and throwaway now. You know that you know, if we went to a restaurant in London and this gravy, which is one of the greatest things I've ever tasted, it's like 3 days to make. You know, and that's, you know, that's special. And for us, we don't want the show to be polished, you know. We want to say that is special, you know, that let's so how did you make that? You know, we want to be excited about it. It's not us popping in for one day's filming and someone telling us what to say, you know, that it's all genuinely happening, you know.
Yeah. That was Hawksmoor in London, where, like Billy said, I mean, I've never really had my head turned by a roast dinner. I know that's a terrible thing to say as someone who's English, but I like spice and I like fresh flavors and, you know, vibrancy in food and stuff. And a roast dinner, fine, but it's just never really revved my motor. It completely changed the way I felt about a roast dinner. And this chef, Matt at Hawksmoor, we just, while we were waiting for the Yorkshire puddings, one of us said, so how did you become a chef? And he said, well, I came from a part of England where we didn't have a huge amount of money, and I wanted to be a chef, but there were no opportunities here. But there was a kind of a grant system being ran for young chefs to come down to London and stay in digs and work at places like the Ritz and the Savoy and get their training. And Billy and I were just like, this is why we're making the show. Like, if he can tell that story and a kid somewhere else around the world thinks, oh, I'm going to ask if I can do that in my community, then we've cracked it, you know? Yeah.
Looking back to how you met, how did life change for you then after that first day on set on the first Lord of the Rings movie? I mean, how's life changing? Because you both live in California now, right? Yeah,
we both live in Los Angeles. And one of the episodes, we wanted it to be a California for, you know, to kind of show why we're there and what we like about the place. Because I live on the west side and Dom lives in the east, and we wanted to show the differences there. Before we went to Northern California, and that sort of amazing, weird place where sort of it's like they've let people have crazy ideas and big ideas, you know, all iPhones, and it's always Northern California. Somehow it's allowed, so we wanted to look at that, you know. But yeah, how the things change? I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you ever feel that things change, you know, because it becomes your life.
Yeah.
It's a sliding doors thing, isn't it? That that's now your life. I don't know what it would have been if we hadn't done Lord of the Rings, you know.
Yeah.
But it's nice to have Dom in my life, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I agree with Billy. You never really think it's weird or really tune into it being weird, because that would maybe throw you off kilter a little bit, you know. Yeah. If you're a clown and every day at work you're getting custard pies in your face and the car's falling apart, you go, that job must be strange. And you're like, well, I do it 5 times a week. It's just kind of normal. Yeah. So I think you just get used to it. I'm obsessed with the Beatles. Billy and I are huge fans of the Beatles. And one of the things that they all talk about was feeling sorry for Elvis being a musical artist on his own and not being able to share it. And I do think that Rings experience would have been much harder to navigate if I wasn't experiencing it with Billy and Elijah and Sean and Orlando and Vigo. And, you know, this real kind of hardcore group of 9, unfortunately, men. There wasn't any females in the fellowship. 9 men. And I think almost all of them were single, and almost all of them didn't have a huge amount of ties and enjoying their life and dinners and drinks and everything else that came with it. So if you were to have had that similar experience, but it was only you and you couldn't share it with anyone, maybe that throws you off a little bit more. But, you know, I wanted to be an actor since I was a kid, since I was probably, I don't know, 7, 8, something like that. An actor in however way it was going to show up. And of course, any actor, including myself, would be delighted to have done something that was able to cross over in such a way. I mean, we knew it was a great project. We knew that it had been received well by people. But the further we get away from that project, the more you come to terms with the fact that it very quickly kind of rose into this kind of classic moment in cinema. And we were lucky enough to be along for the ride.
It was a huge cultural moment. And you obviously reunited, didn't you, on Zoom on a podcast, I think.
With Josh Gad,
End of May 2020, I've got written down here. What was that like then? I mean, how long had it been? I mean, I guess you'd seen different cast members at different times since, but what was that experience like?
It was great. We were in the middle of COVID, so I'd gone insane. You know, I'd been living on my own throughout all of COVID and hadn't seen a person who knew me for like 10 months, you know. I was going to the supermarket and just seeing people, but not someone whose face I knew and whose face knew mine. And I'd gone mad, you know. I just really enjoyed the madness, but definitely gone mad. So to see what ended up being, you know, 14, 15 people who I loved in front of me, it was like an amazing moment for me during COVID. Really special. And I think a lot of that, we raised a lot of money for charity as well, which was a great feeling, you know. Yeah,
it was a strange time, wasn't it? Because everyone was trying to reinvent art or something and put it online, you know. So there was a lot of people asking you to do plays online and stuff. I kind of avoided all of it.
Did you get involved in the Imagine song, you know? With
no, I didn't. You know, just there was all of that stuff, you know, and that was the first thing that I did. So as Dom says, it was kind of weird to like see everybody in.
It was intense,
in their little rooms somewhere.
Yeah. Everyone's growing big beards, right? All the men are growing big beards. Yeah.
Nobody had any trousers on, they're all dressed from the waist up.
Talking about the Beatles, and obviously Peter Jackson went on from Lord of the Rings to do lots of other amazing projects, but one of which was the Beatles.
Yeah, extraordinary.
I mean, you must have been looking on in envy of what he was.
We both were. You know, we would. I mean, I think Billy and I. It was probably our favorite documentary of the year when it came out, wasn't it? We watched it so many times, and Pete's a huge Beatles nerd, and there were times, you know, before it came out, quite close to the release, where he would, you know, send a couple of emails of hints. Oh, you're going to like this, you're going to like that. And, you know, I've always been a little annoyed with this narrative of Yoko breaks up the Beatles. I mean, Yoko didn't break up the Beatles. The Beatles are big enough and smart enough to break up their own band. They don't need Yoko to come in. And, you know, all these things of like, you know, whatever, Paul's the hard worker and George is the spiritual guy and John's the kind of lunatic and Ringo's the actor and all this kind of stuff. And you see these are fully rounded humans and they have faults and they have foibles, but they clearly love each other and they're clearly in a pressure cooker. And I mean, that moment where you see Paul start the genesis of Get Back and then Harrison kind of helps out and Ringo's in the back just kind of following along. I was like, what am I watching here? This is magic.
And you try to help him write it. Yeah. Because we know it. We're like, no, it's not that. Oh, that's amazing. I just put it on as background.
Yeah.
It's one of the best things I've ever seen.
Yeah, brilliant.
And you've just recently done a theatre production together, fairly recently in Canada.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
So when Dom and I were up a tree in the second of the Lord of the Rings movies, Treebeard, we were stuck up there quite a lot of time. So we're always discussing what we wanted to do. One of the ideas was to do Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, which is a play that we really liked. And I was working in Halifax doing a TV show and got to know the theatre and got to know the director. And he'd asked me to do a couple of things and it never worked out. But I really love Halifax. I love it as a city. And he said, do you think Dom would think about doing Rosencrantz and Guildenstern? I said, we spoke about this 20 years ago. I said, I'll run it past them. And then the wheels start going, you know, could we fit it into our diaries at the same time? Could the theatre fit it in? And then it all just worked out. And I said to Dom, I think you'll love Halifax. And then we put on the back of that, we went to Toronto with it. And it was great. It's as good a play as I thought it was. And it was a really nice production. And, we played in Halifax. Dom got to know the town a little bit.
Which will be a great location for Billy and Dom Eat the World season 2.
Yeah.
Halifax.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, great people, great restaurants, really fun. They're doing their own thing. They're in their own little lane.
Yeah.
Great for
Yes.
season 2.
Ones that have been there, like the Bicycle Thief that's been there forever. And then there's the Highwayman that's just opened and the guy's passionate about making food. So, yeah, I mean, again, just all these places are great for the show. But it was really fun to do a theatre piece together because by the time we die, we're going to do every piece of art together.
Yeah.
And what about Bee Cake? So you're in a band called Bee Cake?
Yeah, I am. We've done a few albums together, 3 now. Sadly, one of the guys passed away a couple of years ago there. So we do have one other album recorded, but we're just working on when's the best time to release that. And, but I was just up in Glasgow. I just saw the guys there and they're all doing very well. We went out for a nice Italian meal.
Oh, I thought you were going to say an Indian because you would assume that in Glasgow with you guys.
I tell you what, I did go for an Indian, Tom, and it was fantastic.
When in Glasgow, have you had Indian food in Glasgow?
I must have done.
Very good.
Yeah.
Because obviously you got, London, I'm sure, Bradford and Manchester and Birmingham and stuff, but Glasgow makes
and the kind of thing that we're talking about in the show, which we love, where, a restaurant like Mr. Singh's in Glasgow, it's great Indian food, and then slowly they add haggis, so you can get haggis pakora now. Right. They're taking what's from that community, and then that changes it, and it kind of changes the community because of that. Yeah. It's all really interesting.
Proper fusion.
Yeah.
Real fusion, yeah.
So there's a restaurateur up there, Sharon Gill, whose daughter just opened a new Indian restaurant that I went to, and it is some of the best Indian food I've ever had. Wow. Not quite the sort of Glasgow, classic Indian food, but we must try that when we go to next time.
All right.
Glasgow.
There's another location there.
Yeah.
Dom, I've got to ask you about Star Wars. So you've appeared not only in Lord of the Rings, but Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker.
And X-Men. He's in them all.
And what was that experience like?
Oh, you know what? That was just kind of a boyhood dream thing. It's just this kind of thing that you can't turn down. It was the last Euros. So tomorrow, England are going to play Holland in the semi-finals of this current European football competition. The last Euros, we were in a quarter-final against Colombia, and I'm friends with JJ Abrams, which sounds like a name drop, but we were just friends from doing Lost years ago. And he sent me an email before the match begun. JJ and I like to kind of tease each other and have fun with each other. And he said, if England win this game, I might have a role for you in Star Wars, but if they lose it...
No.
He was joking. I hope he was joking. So we went to a penalty shootout. It was the first penalty shootout that England have won in a major competition for like 30 years or something. So by the time we got to the penalty shootout, I was like, oh no, it's not going to happen.
Trying to use the force.
Yeah. But we ended up winning the penalty shootout. And then, JJ got on the phone with me and said, I'm back in LA in a week. Let's have a chat when I get back. So we got back. He said, look, everything's under lock and key. Obviously, John Boyega and Daisy Ridley and Oscar Isaacs have a script. But he said, you're going to do 4 or 5 scenes and there's no real script. I'll get you something to read when you get to London. And I said, of course, Star Wars is the reason I'm an actor. It's not my favorite film. I think Apocalypse Now is probably my favorite film, but Star Wars is certainly the most influential film because it was a thing that made me want to act. So you just, or I am personally just never turning down that role. Of course, I would want to play a bigger role or be in the entire trilogy or be in the original trilogy. We all would. But if someone comes along, especially someone who who's directing it and says, can you come and do a little favor for me? I was delighted, and I was a real nerd because they were giving out Star Wars jackets and all this kind of stuff. And John and Daisy and I and Oscar, who I became pally with, they were like, no, we're good. We don't need a jacket. And I was like, so I had like 4 or 5 jackets. I'll take it. Caps and, sign this and sign that. So I was a real nerd. But I think my favorite moment was we were on set, a huge set in, was it Shepperton? No, it was Pinewood. This was Pinewood. and something had gone wrong with the lights, massive set of lights above. So JJ got on the megaphone and he said, guys, it's going to be like a 35 to 40 minute reset, but there was a bunch of actors on the stage. And he said, if you could just do me a favor, instead of us resetting all you guys as well, and then bringing you back, which is going to take another 20 minutes getting in costumes, you messed your hair up, you've had a nap, you've got sausages, gravy falling down your face and stuff. He said, if you could just wait, have a chat, sit down, do your thing, it would just be a much faster turnaround. And we were like, yeah, okay. And he said, great. And then he said, cue the music. And they played Intergalactic by the Beastie Boys really, really loud in the studio. And all the rebels were dancing with all the stormtroopers. And I was like, oh, come on. It's just
Does it get better than that?
I've never seen that footage. I mean, that's got to come out one day.
Yeah, at some point.
And Hans Jensen.
Oh, yeah, sure. Hans Jensen.
Do you think Hans will ever make an appearance again?
I pitched it to Pete. When Pete was doing The Hobbit, I said, what if we have Hans come in and talk to Martin Freeman, but you actually see him this time, and just do a little interview with Martin Freeman.
Sure.
Pete liked the idea, but he's just like, we'll see what we can do. And it never worked out. But I mean, maybe if it's special, that's the strange thing is like, because I see these things in media that happen once and they're really special. And you think, oh, don't ruin it. Just leave it as it is, So a part of me is like, do you dilute it by doing it again? It would have to be something really special. But poor Elijah, because we're all really good friends with Elijah and he's such a good sport. But at every single one of these conventions, they'll mention it and Elijah will be like, yeah, thank you very much.
My kid said, you've got to ask this question.
Will you wear wigs? And all
she's 14, my daughter, and she said, you've got to ask about
it. What's funny is like, I'm sure Billy gets his version of this as well, and it is very sweet. But people will come over to me and they'll expect that you've never heard it before, right? So someone will come over and they'll get me to sign something and we'll be chatting and they'll say, oh, I just wanted to ask you, will you wear wigs? And I'm like, oh, yeah. Like, have you heard that before? And I'm going, yeah, I've heard it. I've heard it a couple of thousand times, but yeah, it's fun.
So back to the show. What about cooking? What do you like? What do you cook at home? What's your favorite dish to cook at home?
Good question. On a Wednesday morning, we always have crepes. And my son, I think that's maybe his favourite thing, to the point that he's going to college this year. And he says on a Wednesday, he's going to keep that going at college.
Nice. Keep the tradition going. Brilliant.
Yeah. I think, like what we're talking about, when there's a tradition or something, it just makes it more special, doesn't it? So on a Wednesday morning, we put on Paul Simon on the music.
Graceland.
Yes, thank you. Mm-hmm. And then make some crepes. And it's just a good start to the day.
He does a good Christmas dinner, Billy.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Because, there are times where I won't go over to England because, the flight, or maybe my parents have gone to see my brother or something like that. So I'm kind of, in LA, and Billy will say, do you want to come down? And I'll kind of say, oh, no, it's fine. You guys do your thing. He's like, no, come down. And I think there's been 3 or 4 occasions where I'll show up and the kitchen will be chaotic.
Oh, it's chaotic.
And
yes.
I'll think, I'm not sure if he's going to pull it together this year. And he always pulls it together. It's great.
And Dom will bring down a pudding or something that he's made. Right. And there was a little twist to it this year, was it? Was that this year or the year before?
Yeah, the time before. So I'll try and bring something. And this time I did an apple and rhubarb crumble, which was nice.
Crumble, lovely.
But you're always trying to put a little extra kind of spin on it, so it's different. The version that you've done is a little different. So I added what I thought was a pinch of cayenne pepper, just so you kind of go, hello.
What is that?
But it actually ended up being a spicy pudding, didn't it?
It was. Is that cayenne pepper?
Yeah. Your son liked it.
He did. He loved it.
And it's nice with a bit of vanilla ice cream, but I did go a little bit over. So I like spicy food, so I went a little bit over the top.
Guys, thank you so much for coming on TellyCast. It's been brilliant chatting with you. Can't wait to see Billy and Dom eat the world, which I know lots of conversations are going on with broadcasters all around the world. So I'm sure it's going to be coming to TV screens later this year or in the new year. So best of luck with it. I can't wait to see season 2 because I know you're going to get there. The show looks amazing. So thanks again for coming on TellyCast.
Thanks Justin. Thanks a lot.
Well, that's about it for this week's show. I hope you enjoyed it. TellyCast was produced by Spirit Studios and recorded in London. For videos featuring the movers and shakers of the TV and digital content industries, don't forget to subscribe to TellyCast. Just hit the link in the episode description or search TellyCast TV on YouTube. We'll see you next week for another show. Until then, stay safe.